Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Lit Happens with your hosts, Adriel and Belle. Today's Teacher Talk episode is going to focus on use of technology in the English classroom. So, we're going to be talking about our own thoughts, our own experiences, what we see being used, and just what we think and feel. So, hello, Adriel. Welcome back. I think as we record this, we're week 3 into term 3. How have you been
Mhm.
settling?
Yeah, doing well, doing well. I think it's busy period as we've sort of been mentioning over the last few weeks, and it's funny we're talking about technology right now. We're always having those conversations in the teaching circles regarding the use of technology, the ever encroaching threat of AI, especially in English classrooms when it comes to assessment
Yeah,
tasks. So it's
yeah,
quite a topical sort of cause for discourse this morning, as we do record. So it'll
absolutely.
be interesting. It'll be interesting. And yeah, no, apart from that, doing well. Just trudging along. And I think it's probably that feeling as a lot of teachers and students alike are jumping into term 3 at the moment as we record this year. So yeah, how about yourself?
Doing well. Like you said, start of the term, trying to get back into the swing of things. And I know a lot of schools are in the midst of trials now. So that marking will come due. Year 12
Yeah,
reports will come due. It's a busy time of the year, and I think this is a really good episode to talk about, because I know that firstly we'll talk about how we're using technology in the classroom, but then we're going to look at AI, and not just what students are doing with it, but what
mm,
ways teachers are maybe using it to alleviate some of their administrative pressures. So I think
yeah,
this will be a really nice topic for today. Yeah, something that's
mm,
really, really, really relevant. So as listeners are, having a or open to our little chat here, they might be reflecting on their own classroom
yeah,
or school uses as well. And I think it'll be good to see, we're both working in two very different school systems. So I think this will be interesting to see, what different schools are using and doing and how it's being applied and different approaches. And I think that will depend on different
mm,
schools of thought as well. So shall
yeah,
we shall we get into the episode then,
yeah,
Adriel?
yeah. Let's get into it.
All right, perfect. So, I wanted to start off with the first question on more so to do with how teachers are applying it in their classrooms. So, here we want to look at what are we using and how heavily might we be relying on technology in our English classrooms and lessons. So, I think this is going to be very dependent on perhaps how tech savvy a teacher is. I
Mm,
think also
mm,
depending on how much access there is to technology in any given school, and also I think how the students are engaging in the classroom. So are they using the technology effectively, or are they using it to kind of go play some games, and it's a constant back and forth to get them back on track. But maybe we can talk about some benefits and some challenges we've noticed. Adriel, what do you think?
yeah. Yeah, I think there's obviously going to be it's a dynamic time, always in teaching,
Yeah.
and as we always talk about as educators, there's always room to learn. And
Mm.
yeah, I know, like I'm pretty old school as we've sort of looked at before. I actually asked this question the other day in my classroom. I asked my 12s, said, "Oh, am I like one of your only teachers that still uses the whiteboards and then texters?" And that is in the context of our school where we have devices for every single student, and everyone sort of jumps onto one of the teaching platforms. I think we use Canvas at our school, so it's all accessible online. So it's one of those things where the students will take out their laptops alongside their workbooks, and I will often have
Mm.
my pencil case there with a whole heap of texters ready to go. But I also do think that there is merit for technology in the classroom now as well, because I remember back in the day when we were teaching, maybe when we first started and sort of got into it, we used to have like a class set of laptops, and that used to be like a privilege for a lot
Yes.
of the kids, and we'd book it, and sometimes we'd be frustrated when things like other classes may use it, they won't charge the whole thing, and they just put
Yeah.
your lesson sort of off. But in this day and age now, with technology becoming more and more ever present and schools moving towards systems where everything is accessible online. So whether it be something
Mhm.
like Canvas or whether it be something like the Google Classroom, which
Yeah.
I understand many of the DET schools definitely do make use of. Uh, we do need to adapt as educators as well, and we need to sort of use its advantages to help us, I guess, facilitate this new generation or new crop of kids coming through. Because again, like in conversation with people, even like in conversation with mates of mine who have young families and young students coming through, and we're just talking about, what happens when we get older. And I feel like I'm pretty tech savvy every now and then the kids will come in and they'll tell me all of these different commands and ways in which they can access shortcuts. I mean, I was having a great conversation with one of my students in year 11 recently. This guy's like a coding genius, developing
Mm.
websites, looking at, yeah, harnessing AI and coding, all that sort of stuff. And I'm just like, oh, well. So it's quite interesting. But when we think about how we're using it in the English classroom, I still think that we can't detract from the fact that we do need to be writing in the classroom.
Yeah.
And that's something that my current place of employment is moving or shifting more towards. And that is often a sign, which I think is important, because when we look at the way students write, especially in English, especially with that skill of writing, which is one of our major core components or foundational elements of the
Mhm.
subject, if
Mhm.
students aren't writing, they're not getting that mind muscle connection to what they're doing, their pen to paper sort of strategy. And
Mm.
we often hear this
True.
about author speaking. We hear about neuroscientists sort of talking about that mind pen connection, muscle memory that develops as you continually go through the reps of writing and all this sort of stuff. But I think that's one of those core things that we do need to be mindful of as English teachers.
Mhm.
Do not
Mhm.
neglect the fact that we still need to be promoting that skill of writing, as it is one of our foundational core sort of elements. But yeah,
Yeah.
look, in terms of Google Docs, you and I are both pretty big proponents of this, with all the ways in which we can separate it into basically having a kid's study workbook in one
Yeah,
document
with all
now.
the
So it
tabs.
centralizes,
Mm.
yeah, exactly right. So it centralizes all of their notes. And if kids are using this effectively, it's wonderful. It's a very powerful tool, alongside the fact that students can have access to information at the touch of a button now. So the
Yeah.
process of research now has been streamlined, but we now need to probably put in place different ways in which we can ethically use this
Yeah.
these platforms. So no longer is it just like a Google search, for example. Their search engine now is some sort of AI platform. So, okay, when we're looking at AI platforms, well, what are the prompts that we can encourage students with when they're using it? So, to the fact that they're not going to be using to write their responses for them, but they're using it as an effective, powerful tool that will help to facilitate their understanding of core concepts or key ideas, or even helping to break down academic sources and journals. Like, these are different things that we can look at. But yeah, like
Yeah.
we it's a fine tension as teachers. Like,
It is.
we can't heavily rely upon it to do some of the points. Like, I was looking at like this, like, if we're looking at technology in the classroom, it's a powerful tool, and that's all it will be. It's a tool. We still need to do the work. We need to use that tool. Like, you could have let's say an excavator to dig up a garden, or like my gardening sort of analogies here at the moment. And if I'm going next level, all right. But that excavator, without someone operating it correctly and properly, without having the skills to operate it, will be useless. It'll be just a big piece of metal sitting there in the front yard. Similarly, with our tools that we have in terms of the technology in the classroom, like, we've got access to it all, but if we're using it incorrectly, there's a lot of damage that can be done. And I think that's one of those important things that English teachers in particular do need to be mindful of. But yeah, so what are we using? How heavily are we relying on it? That's for the students. But I think as teachers also, we just have to be mindful of that as well. Even in our own craft, that we don't get lazy. We still need to do the readings ourselves. I can have that tendency to sometimes, oh, look, I'll just run it through this system or quickly jump on board the same bandwagon as students. When you're under the
Yeah.
pump, when you're under pressure, um,
Of
but you just
course.
need to take the time out to make sure you understand your text. Like, I know personally, and this is personally speaking, I'm not throwing any stones from my glass house here, but, if you're running short on maybe reading time for a novel or something, you might have that temptation to run it through, get some quotes. Just make sure you double check everything, make sure you read.
Yeah, yeah,
Reading a novel won't take you too long. It's one of our core principles. It's a pastime for English teachers. I think, yeah, so just be mindful of that. But when we come
yeah,
to things like report writing, helping to condense assessment tasks and put together criteria, just the admin sort of work, I think technology
mm,
can definitely be harnessed to help us. But I'm sure you'll speak a bit into that in our next few minutes here. So I guess like how can
yeah.
we use it to help facilitate that admin stuff, administrative workload?
I feel like it always comes back to exactly the word you used. Are you using it as a tool and not as like a replacement? And like that's everything there, you know.
Mhm.
Is it a tool? Is it something that's going to support and maybe provide guidance but not sort of override the skills that you're trying to teach? Like I know you talked about Google Suite and Docs. Like I love that for collaboration. Like
Mm,
I've done a lot of tasks where students will work in a group on one document where they've all got eyes on it. But
yeah.
you know, you're right, there is that fine line. Then you've got to be careful of things like potential collusion, and when things are digital and a
Mm,
lot more accessible, you do sort of open yourself up that way. I remember when we started teaching, flip learning was a big thing,
mm,
you know, where
mm,
you could on Google Classroom upload some videos or information for students to watch, so that they come into class sort of already thinking about what they're going to be learning. And I
yeah.
think all those things are really great, but access to the devices is a big hindrance, I think, in some schools. Like I'm at a school where we do have access to devices, but faculties might have a couple of class sets or a couple
Yeah.
or an iPad class set. And if you've got 4, 5, 6 English classes at the same time, that
Mm,
you know that takes a bit more planning. But I think it's actually really accessible for the ways in which schools where students have their own. Like I
mm,
think in
mm,
that way, like, there's just options, and I think it's nice to have options. I know, in terms of tech as well, we're using a particular platform at the moment called iExcel,
mm,
that is very numeracy and literacy skills based. And you know, it's kind of like a website. The students log in, and it gives you diagnostics. It lets you make specific quizzes and just look at what they're actually
mm,
doing skills wise, which is pretty
mm,
cool. I've been using it a little bit as part of my literacy targeted literacy role this year. And so from what I hear, there are a lot of platforms like that out there. We used to have
yeah.
Education Perfect. Did you ever use Education Perfect?
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
there was something else.
Atomi, all of these different sort of,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. They all Anatomy from back in the day, and they've all like
yep,
churned now, and there's new. So I think that the beauty is there's actually a lot out there that's
mm,
unique enough that a school can go, this is going to fit
yeah,
our pedagogy, our demographic, as opposed to we're all just trying to use the same thing and make it work. I think that's kind of nice. It's just open up those options and those possibilities. But I will say it's still a struggle sometimes to make sure that students are actually doing what they should be doing
mm,
on the
mm,
technology and not bypassing the firewalls and kind of getting on and
mm,
playing cool math games and the likes. So I think
yeah,
that's one of those things. And I also feel like, just kind of last point before we move on to the AI stuff, I also feel like, and you know, this might also be a socio-demographic thing too, that there are a
mm,
lot of students who don't have digital literacy skills,
mm,
and don't have basic skills, as in, you know, don't know how to problem solve, can't clear
mm,
history, can't sort of do
mm,
those things. And so it is a bit of a it is a bit of a concern sometimes when they just jump to the Google and then just whack whatever AI has told them
yeah,
without thinking about, where did that information come from? What do we do with it?
yep,
How do we actually search and find a website? So I think there's like give and take. There's a lot of beauty to it, but there's also skills that are
yeah,
really missing. I don't know. I don't have any answers, but I
mm,
just remember back in the day, Drill, we used to have computer classes when we were in high school.
Yeah, that's true. With those skills, it's true. In
Yeah,
primary
and
school as
taught how
well.
to and taught how to do all those basic problem solving, and I find the kids are good with maybe apps, but they're not
Yeah.
necessarily really strong with like systems and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think
Uh,
that too, like you got to consider what the class is capable of, and then you know kind of what to do with that.
yeah. I think just a final sort of thing to add here with
Mm,
our tools, they're more and more powerful now in what they can do, but they've taken
mm,
away a lot of the steps that we as people or humans would generally input so that we could get it to where we wanted it in terms of using the
yeah,
tools. It's sort of like the tools nowadays have the propensity to maybe use us as humans more. So it'll gather data as to like what our tendencies are, and it'll then adapt according to that rather than us being the controller. So it sort of leads down that,
true.
1984 Orwellian Terminator, Skynet. Like we're looking at all of these different sort of ideas as to how technology is working. And I just think it goes back to that question or that idea that I painted before. We need to make sure, even as teachers, that we're not letting it become the driver of our pedagogy, but
Yeah,
we drive it
true.
as something that allows us to be effective, powerful teachers in the classroom. Because at the end of the day, you're the teacher, and we often have this tension as well in our discussions with colleagues from different industries, all saying that AI is taking over their workplaces, technology is now replacing humans. And as teachers, we've probably been in that field where we're saying, well, teaching is it going to be something that can be taken over? And
Mm,
is it something that, a human skill that AI or technology, as we're sort of going to move into a little bit, discussions, can it replace it? 5 years ago, you would have said no. Look, you always need a person in the classroom, but
mhm,
nowadays we look at this student-centered learning and um, the lack of teacher sort of awareness. I mean, we're seeing it in unis. I know, in particular, for myself, doing extra education in my last few years now, and I do it just all online. Everything is recorded or pre-recorded. You're not really having face-to-face interactions with your tutors anymore, and a lot of the development of the courses you can see is influenced heavily by technology. I'm not saying necessarily AI, but
mm,
it's all online. It's all self-centered learning, and there is this removal of the teacher. So I guess the responsibility falls on us as teachers to ensure that we're using the tools again wisely so as to
mm.
not be replaced by the tool itself. I think that's
Sure.
probably the discussion, and we can continue to have that discussion as we do move forward. And this will be probably pretty prominent in a few years' time. I know we say like 5-year blocks, but the way the world moves right now, it's probably like every year
Sooner.
or every 6 months,
Yeah.
like something changes. And it's weird, like thinking even about AI as we pivot a little bit towards that with our next teacher question. But I know with AI, what was it, 2022, 2023 is when it started to come in. And now it dominates most
It's
conversations when
everywhere.
it comes to, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. But like if we talk
Yeah.
about technology now, it's not technology, it's AI technology. So it's now a more nuanced sort of perspective in terms of discussions.
Yes.
And it's something that
Mhm.
we as teachers are now moving towards. And it's something, I guess we're going to be talking a little bit about it in the ways in which we're responding to it, especially in regards to assessment tasks and how
Mhm.
students are leveraging it to, do their work rather than them doing the work. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I
Yeah.
guess let's pivot towards that question and we'll
Yeah, no,
divulge a
it's a
bit more.
perfect transition. So, speaking of this AI use, how should English teachers respond to it? Not just English teachers, I suppose, but just because we like to talk about things within our KLA, within our experiences. I know there are a lot of strong opinions on this. Some people really like it. I have heard of some schools teaching students more ethical ways to use it, which I think is a really interesting choice. I know that there are also schools that are having really big problems once it's assessment time,
Mm, mm,
um, delineating between the AI and the non AI, and even examples of where schools have tried to implement it in their policy and use systems like Turnitin, and then have the department say like we kind of can't do that, and it's
yeah,
really I think worrying for teachers because it's quite frustrating. And so I mean
yeah,
we'll talk about I guess the way that schools and teachers are maybe countering these effects. But,
Yeah.
well, even if we speak, I know I'm talking about it more from students using, I think for me, the concern is they're using it a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time
Yeah.
to replace skills that they need to be themselves
That's right.
honing. I think yeah, I think it's very different when it's, a teacher knows how to do an essay and they might be using it for something administrative as like a tool or an assistant.
Yeah.
And then because they know how to do it themselves, they can verify whether it's appropriate, not appropriate, whether it's
Mm,
correct or incorrect.
mm,
And I don't think students are capable of that. And therefore, in a way, it's like, well, it's just another way of them being told how to think. Don't you
yeah.
think? Like, it's not,
Yeah, that's
I
right.
don't really feel like when they use AI, it's allowing that real diversity of thought and ideas, and I think for me, that is a potential concern. Like, what are your thoughts,
Yeah.
Adriel?
I mean, the purpose of English for us, if we're looking at from the English perspective, there is to develop our critical thinking, develop our own voice, and
Exactly.
develop an understanding through our nuanced lens, through our particular contexts, which we like to promote in our English KLA. So, I think when we look at that, if we ask AI all these questions, well, you're sort of moving towards that very robotic way or point of view, aren't you, in terms of life? And
Mhm.
I think you mentioned the keywords like ethical use of AI these days, and I know I sort of alluded to this before. I said, if we're doing administrative work where it's like busy work when it comes to teaching, so for example, if you needed to help you eliminate some of the busyness of data collecting or developing comments or synthesizing maybe something that you've
Mhm.
inputted yourself, so
Yep,
you've given it a really direct prompt, you've directed it, then it's a very powerful, wonderful tool.
I
But
agree.
again, and then again, I think this is the thing because we're so time poor in this day and age, even as teachers, because the demands of the job sort of necessitate X, Y, and Z boxes being ticked left, right, and center. And it's just the way of the world. I'm not jumping into all the politics and the conversations we could have regarding like why this is occurring, but because
Yeah,
of that sort of direction that the world has taken, I think we as teachers can have that tendency to even jump on board the AI bandwagon and get it to do some of our work rather than us being intentional in terms of the way we use it. And so I'm
mhm.
not critiquing, I'm just saying just to be mindful of this because I too fall into that boat sometimes where I think back afterwards, I'm like, oh, and then kids will pick up on it as well. Sometimes they'll know, like in the classroom, they're like, oh, this is AI or this is AI, especially images these days. They're also
Mhm.
starting to pick up on the little prompts and traits, and which is making it more difficult when we come to assessments, which we'll talk about in a second. But I
Yeah,
think when we consider the way that AI is driving the development of technology, we just need to make sure that we ourselves are being ethical in our use of it as well. And like I
yeah,
said, it's a constant battle, it's a constant tension. It's not something that will be I'm not going to use it ever again because you're a bit silly if you take that perspective, you'll be left in the dirt. And when everyone
true.
is now
Elsewhere.
elsewhere,
Mhm.
moving up in whatever the way the world has moved, like you need to
Yeah,
keep up with it. You do. It's like when computers first came into education, and a lot of people were used to their old books or writing things, everything down. We just know computers are such a powerful tool now that if you go into teaching without one, you're doing yourself a disservice, the way the world sort of works. And computer technology is basically the way the world is moving. Now, if we take that same lens with AI and we say, well, I'm not going to move forward with it and I'm not going to learn about it. I think you alluded to this. It's like schools are now implementing ethical ways in which we can use AI for both teachers and students alike, and platforms alike.
mhm.
I think it's just a question that we always need to sort of be mindful of. But the way teachers respond, I'll give you an example. We few ways in which we can look at, I guess, ethical ways of using it. I try and drive it in my education. So even when I get kids to do a research task, I say, don't just say to AI, "Oh, give me the answer to this," but go do a bit of research. These are the things that I
Mm,
understand. These are
mhm.
my understandings of whatever the question is that Sir has asked me. Feed. your AI thing, and then look at it, delineate, and then and sort of, I guess, look at what is the important information, what is the information that I need, what is it that is just jargon, and be mindful. So be critical in analyzing what it spits out, similar to your research process. Um,
Yeah.
and that's very, very important. I
I
know
like
in
that. That's a
assess
much more ethical way and productive way of them
yeah,
using it to support their understanding as opposed to replace
that's
it. What
right.
a really great tip. Very good tip,
Yeah,
Adriel.
that's
Yeah.
right. And I think that's very, very important. And again, it's not like you're saying, "Do my work for me." It's no, you're using it as a powerful, amplified research tool now.
Yeah.
But when it comes to assessments, just a few things that I've noted. Students are picking up now on the way that AI is using Americanized language, for example, in Australia. So
Mhm.
they know how to adjust that. They'll often put it as a student voice and try to avoid AI checkers and all this sort of stuff, which is again they're picking up on it. I remember like the M
Yeah.
dashes used to be like a big thing where you used to see some of these, or even the forward slashes when it comes to quotes. That is
Yes.
a very clear sign of AI, but kids are picking up on that now, and we need to sort of understand things. Now there are some powerful extensions. So we often do our assessment tasks on Google Docs, which will say to the students, obviously, hand your task in as a PDF. However, if AI does come back in terms of the AI checkers that we do have, give us your Google Doc to show us the progression of the way that your document was,
Yeah.
I guess, developed. I know
The
recently
timestamps, right?
that's
Like the
that's
history?
right. That's
Yeah.
right. So you can see the history of the document, and I'm learning as well. I mean, I've been taught by a few of my current staff members who have got all these extensions. I mean, I learned something new the other day. There's an extension that you can get which actually documents the typing progress of that
Oh,
document.
wow.
So you can
That's
track
awesome.
like we know it. You and I know in English in particular, like it's always a process of refining, deleting stuff, going back and forth,
Yes.
and so what this
Yes.
extension does, if I get the name of it, I'll tell you. So I'm still learning, but basically it tracks the whole document. Now you'll know as an English teacher if a student, another thing that students are doing now is they'll have AI on a different screen and they'll still type it up,
Mhm.
but you'll see that the whole document is literally this just green, like there's no mistakes made whatsoever. Yeah,
Yeah, and then that becomes really disingenuous. You're like, "Okay,
that's
that's
right.
probably not
'Cause
you." Yeah, gotcha. That's
exactly. So
really
what's
cool. I
going
didn't
on
know there's
here?
extension for that. Yeah.
So
So
you
there's
can
lots of
see
things
like
coming out to kind of combat the AI use.
that's
Is
right.
that right?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And you've got like AI checkers, and generally like if it's one AI checker that's coming up and you'll be like, oh, okay, maybe they are still being genuine. But if it starts to flag on like three, four online, like the free ones, I mean your school may have a access to paid ones as well, like Turnitin, but still it's not 100% certain. Um,
Mm.
you you check it against like four or five and you're like, oh, okay. Or as I've said, and I think we had this early on in the early AI days where we did a creative piece for back when we were working together at our old place of employment. And
Mhm.
I remember the creative piece, this word tapestry was used
Oh,
constantly
yeah,
in
kept
all the
coming
creative
up all the
pieces.
time.
And then it's
Yeah.
like, well, we never even spoke about this amongst the teaching staff. We never talked about
Mhm.
this. We didn't introduce this as a motif or an
Yeah.
extended
Why so
metaphor.
many kids talking
And
about
all of
it?
a sudden,
Yeah.
all of these, the threads of life or the tapestry of
Yeah.
life, and we're just like,
It's those
what is going
phrases,
on?
weren't there?
That's
Yeah.
right. So generally, if like AI will pick up in a certain area, certain kids are asking it the same things, it'll put together, remember, it's a machine. It'll put together, okay, well, everyone's asking me this, let's spit out the same pieces of information. And everyone's pieces will start to sound alike. So there are a few nuanced ways where us as teachers need to respond to it. And this is where we need to be critical in the way that we look at it. And then my final tip. So there's a few things. There's some great AI checkers, extensions. Like I said, looking out for repeating ideas that you may not have necessarily taught in your program. And then the last
Mm.
one is sometimes students will use language that goes far beyond their capacity. So this is where you'll know each and every one of your students, and sometimes they'll word things. Because AI is pretty clever. Remember, it's got access to the whole world, whichever one that you use. They're using phrases and words that even like myself as a teacher, they may not understand. And so when I get their piece, I'll speak to them. Before even mentioning to them anything about AI, I'm like, "Oh, what does this phrase mean? Give me an understanding as to how you've used it." And if they
Yes.
sit there and they just be like, "Oh, well, no, I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, tell me,
Yeah.
explain it to me, so that your
Yeah.
teacher simplified mine. Apparently, you're far greater than I am at the moment with the way that you're writing these pieces." And as you build that narrative, often they'll be like, "Oh, maybe I got these ideas from somewhere else," and then you'll get the
Yeah.
whole story out of them as a final
That's
sort of,
true. That's a really
yeah,
easy way to, yeah, to whittle out the truth. Because 'cause I've had that happen a few times, and they
yeah.
came very quickly because they got nothing.
No, that's
What a
right, that's right.
shame. Yeah.
And often you'll
Well,
do that without
go on, sorry. Mhm.
no, no, often you'll do that without them having their technology in front of them,
Mhm.
so they can't quickly research it either.
Yeah,
Because if you're writing
exactly.
something, you know what you've written, and you know why you've done it. That's
Exactly.
the intentional craft of
Exactly.
writing.
'Cause you
So
exactly. Yeah.
that's right.
I
So then
think
it
that's
goes back
why
to, oh,
mm,
sorry. It goes
no,
back
no, no.
to, like, that other extension that I was talking about, where if they're just going continually green line, green line, green line, no mistakes, no refining, no going back and forth.
It doesn't check
You've
out,
got
does
2
it?
pieces you've got 2 pieces of evidence now. It's like we're lawyers now, in a way, with AI.
Yeah, and I think that frustrates a lot of teachers because it's like, I don't have time for the
Yeah,
bare bones of what I need to do, let alone I have to go through all these hoops now to keep
yeah,
my students accountable, and I
yeah,
can totally see that's really frustrating, and it's why a lot of schools have reverted back to more in-class tasks, but
yeah,
I think you made a really good point about, when it's not in their voice. And I really think
yeah,
the more that you engage in discussion with your class,
yeah,
you start
yep,
to work out how each of your students speaks and what their vocabulary is like. And it makes it a lot easier when you're looking at your
yeah,
assessments to say, yep, yep, checks out, no, no,
yeah,
doesn't pass, the voice test. But I know a lot of schools now reverting back to more in class writing tasks with perhaps a written scaffold,
yeah,
and maybe more in-person oral responses as opposed to hand-ins, which is a bit of a shame because
yeah,
I know when you and I were in high school, I feel like most of our tasks were in class, and then
yeah,
hand-in became really popular because it was like all about the process and letting students have time to polish, and there's
yeah,
so much merit in that. But if you're going to have to then spend hours of your time
mm,
differentiating between AI use, and plagiarism, well, I can
yeah,
just see why teachers and schools and faculties are like, that's it. We're just going back to in class on the spot. It may be
mm,
harsh, but let's just do
mm,
that. I
yeah,
certainly know of a lot of maybe your more selective and
yep,
competitive schools who do a lot of in-class tasks
yeah,
anyway. I think
yeah,
two birds, one stone. It helps with exam prep, but also
yep,
takes the emphasis off the classroom and puts it solely on student effort and achievement, which I'm
yeah,
sure in the politics of those schools probably works well. It's just a shame that we've moved away from the aspect of polish. I mean, you gave some great
mm,
suggestions on how we can still do that using those
mm,
extensions and stuff, but I can totally see why a lot of faculties are like, we do not have the capability to manage this, so
yeah,
we're going to go back to old school
mm,
ways, which is kind of
mm,
ironic. But what can
mm.
you do?
Yeah, but the world,
Mm.
that's part of the world. The world goes around in cycles, and it adds
It
bits and
does actually.
pieces, and
Yeah.
that's part of the narrative of our contemporary world, or even actually the human story at the moment. There we go. There's a little bit of an English narrative there for a lot of
Mm.
us, text and human experiences folks.
The tapestry of our humanity.
Oh goodness me, this is why people hate English teachers as well. You just connect
Yeah,
everything to
sorry
raw
everyone.
meaning. That's just
Yeah.
life. Come on, sir,
Yes.
relax. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's just life. But no, it's yeah. Look, there's so much more we can talk about when it comes to
Mm.
ways in which
Mhm.
we're responding to it. But I think keep adapting, keep changing. It's not the big bad devil that we might all think about, as much as it's annoying and
Mhm.
frustrating. But
Mm.
can be used powerfully as well to help, I guess, your teaching, and be used to streamline administrative tasks, which we all definitely love doing as educators. Yeah, and I genuinely mean that.
Yep.
the great administrative work. No, but look, I think there's plenty more we can talk about and have great discussions about. But yeah, that may be for another day.
I think so. And we know that this is a hot button topic that faculties are talking about day in, day out. We'd love to hear your thoughts on our socials. I know we've been a bit lax. We've had our own personal life things come in, but hoping
Mm,
to jump back on the socials soon. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. It's a really hot topic. And
yeah.
as always, thank you for your time and thanks for listening. And best of luck as we're getting into term 3 now. Take care, everyone.